The stars had never seemed so cold as they did to Jake Morrison on that final night of freedom. Standing on the command deck of the Mars defense platform, he watched through the reinforced viewport as the void beyond seemed to pulse with an unnatural darkness. At 47 years old, with silver beginning to streak his dark hair, Jake had spent his entire adult life preparing for this moment, the inevitable first contact with an intelligence that had, until now, remained silent. Unidentified vessels entering the system, Lieutenant Sarah Chin reported from her station, her voice tight with controlled fear. Count. 342 and still coming. Jake's hands instinctively tightened on the railing before him. The tactical display lit up with red contacts, each representing a ship larger than any humanity had ever constructed. They moved with the confidence of sharks circling prey, their approach direct and without hesitation. All stations, battle ready, Jake ordered, his voice betraying none of the tremor that ran through his hands. Sound general quarters. Around him, the command center transformed from a place of routine monitoring to a hive of controlled urgency. Red lights flashed, casting shadows across determined faces. Men and women, soldiers, engineers, scientists, moved to their positions with practiced precision. They were humanity's best, gathered from across Earth's scattered outposts. But Jake knew it wouldn't be enough. For decades, humanity had listened to the whispers from the cosmos. They had picked up signals, faint, fragmented, but unmistakably artificial. They had decoded fragments of alien transmissions, piecing together a terrifying picture of a galaxy old, crowded, and violent. Earth was merely a latecomer to a game that had been playing for millennia. The Zelthrons, as they called themselves, had ruled for 3,000 years. Their empire stretched across 10,000 worlds, and every species they encountered either served them or died. There was no third option. "Sir, they're not responding to hails," Communications Officer James Rodriguez reported. "No acknowledgement of our attempts at communication." Jake nodded grimly. He hadn't expected a response. The Zelthrons didn't negotiate. The first shot came without warning. A beam of incandescent energy lanced from the lead alien vessel, striking one of Mars' defense satellites. There was no explosion, just a silent disappearance as the satellite vaporized into atoms. Then another. Then 10 more. Humanity's carefully constructed network of orbital weapons, the pride of Earth's military might, lasted 6 minutes against the invasion force. Jake watched the tactical display turn from yellow to red, then to black as each contact representing human defenses winked out. The enemy moved with terrifying precision, eliminating threats in order of calculated danger. They had done this before, many times. "Sir, we've lost contact with Luna Base," his tactical officer reported, the man's voice cracking. "Earth Defense Fleet is gone. All of it." 20 minutes after the first shot was fired, humanity's military capability was reduced to nothing. Jake stood among the wreckage of his command center, emergency lights flickering across consoles spitting sparks, and waited for the end. The killing stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The Zelthron ships held position, weapons silent, waiting. Then the message came. It was broadcast on every channel and every human language simultaneously. The voice was cold and mechanical, devoid of emotion or inflection. "Surrender. You will serve the Empire. Resistance means death." Jake looked at his crew. Young faces, terrified faces, angry faces. He thought about his daughter on Earth. She was 15. He wondered what kind of life she would have now. "Transmit our surrender," Jake ordered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "All stations, stand down." Within a week, Zelthron forces occupied every major city on Earth. They landed without ceremony, established control points, and began processing the population. Humans were sorted, categorized, and assigned value ratings. The strong went to labor camps. The intelligent went to technical facilities. The beautiful went to service roles. Children were separated from parents and sent to training centers. Lisa Grant stood in line with 300 other teenagers waiting to be processed. She hadn't seen her father since the invasion. Her mother had been taken away 2 days ago, loaded onto a transport ship with other women. Nobody told them where they were going. The Zelthrons were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and large black eyes that seemed to absorb light. They moved efficiently, checking humans with scanning devices, marking them with numbers, sorting them like cargo. They didn't speak to the humans. They didn't need to. When Lisa reached the front of the line, a Zelthron scanned her with a handheld device. It beeped 3 times. The creature made a notation on its display and gestured toward the left corridor. A human guard wearing a collar around his neck pushed her in that direction. The collar. Every human wore one now. It was a thick band of metal that locked around the neck and couldn't be removed. The Zelthrons had explained its function in simple terms. It translated languages, monitored health, and delivered punishment for disobedience. The pain started mild and increased with each infraction. Nobody knew how bad it could get. Nobody wanted to find out. Lisa was assigned to agricultural labor on a colony world. She didn't know its name. The Zelthrons just called it Sector 7G. She was loaded onto a transport ship with 500 other humans, packed into a cargo hold designed for half that number. The journey took 3 weeks. They were fed once a day. There were no windows. People cried at night, but quietly, afraid of triggering the collars. The planet was Earth-like, which made sense. The Zelthrons didn't waste resources. They took humans to worlds where humans could work without expensive life support. Sector 7G had blue skies, breathable air, and endless fields of crops that humans had never seen before. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it was a prison. The work was brutal. Humans labored 18 hours a day, planting, tending, and harvesting alien food for an alien empire. The overseers were Zelthrons who carried shock remotes. They didn't need to use them often. The collars taught obedience quickly. Lisa learned to keep her head down, do her work, and speak only when necessary. She learned that showing emotion was dangerous. The Zelthrons viewed human feelings as defects to be corrected. Crying earned a shock. Anger earned a stronger shock. Defiance earned pain that made you wish for death. But at night in the barracks where humans were locked after work, Lisa whispered with the others. They talked about Earth. They talked about freedom. They talked about family members who might be alive somewhere in the Empire. The Zelthrons monitored everything, but they couldn't stop humans from remembering. Years passed. Lisa grew from a frightened girl into a hardened woman. She watched people die from exhaustion, accidents, and punishment. She watched new humans arrive fresh from Earth, still believing rescue might come. She watched hope die in their eyes as they realized the truth. Nobody was coming. Humanity was alone. Jake Morrison ended up in the asteroid mines of the Sol system. At 50 years old, he was considered past his prime, but still useful. He operated drilling equipment, extracting rare minerals from rocks that had floated in space since the solar system formed. It was dangerous work. People died when equipment failed or asteroids shifted unexpectedly. The Zelthrons didn't care. Humans were replaceable. He thought about his daughter every day. He didn't know where she was. The Empire didn't keep families together. It was more efficient to scatter them across different worlds. Bonds made humans difficult. Isolation made them compliant. 10 years became 20. 20 became 40. An entire generation of humans grew up knowing only slavery. Earth became a breeding farm where the Zelthrons maintained human populations for future labor needs. The old nation's borders and governments meant nothing. There was only the Empire. But humans are dangerous creatures. They adapt. They learn. They survive. And most importantly, they remember. Every parent who told their child about freedom planted a seed. Every whispered conversation in the dark watered it. Every act of quiet defiance gave it sunlight. The Zelthrons thought they had broken humanity. They believed 70 years of slavery had crushed the spirit of the species. They were wrong. They had simply taught humans patience. Jake Morrison was 80 years old, still working in the mines, when he heard the first whisper of resistance. It came from a young maintenance worker who had access to computer systems. The young man's name was Danny Oaks, and he had discovered something interesting about the collars everyone wore. They can be beaten, Danny whispered during a shift change, his voice barely audible over the machinery. I've seen the code. I understand how they work. Jake looked at the young man. He had been born in captivity, never seen Earth, never known freedom. But his eyes burned with something the Zelthrons couldn't crush. Tell me more, Jake said. The seeds of rebellion had been planted decades ago. Now finally, they were beginning to grow. Danny Oaks had never breathed real air. He was born on an industrial moon orbiting a gas giant 300 light-years from Earth. His mother worked in the recycling plants. His father assembled fusion reactors until an accident crushed him between two pieces of machinery. Danny was 6 when that happened. The Zelthrons didn't stop production for funerals. At 23, Danny was considered an excellent slave. He followed orders perfectly, never complained, and showed exceptional skill with computer systems. The Zelthrons promoted him to systems maintenance, giving him access to the facility's networks. They thought his obedience meant loyalty. They were wrong. It just meant he was smart enough to hide his true thoughts. The assembly station where Danny worked produced warships for the Zelthron military. Hundreds of humans labored there, building the very weapons that kept them enslaved. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, but nobody spoke about it. Speaking meant punishment. Danny's job involved maintaining the computer systems that controlled manufacturing. He monitored data flows, fixed glitches, and kept everything running smoothly. It was during routine maintenance that he first saw the collar specifications. The files were supposed to be restricted, but someone had made a routing error. For 10 minutes, Danny had access to the complete technical documentation of the devices that controlled every human in the Empire. He didn't print anything. He didn't copy files. He just read, memorizing as much as he could before the access window closed. That night, unable to sleep, he replayed the information in his mind. The collars were sophisticated technology, but they were also standardized. Every collar worked the same way. They all connected to the same network. They all received updates from central servers, and they all had the same vulnerabilities. Danny began experimenting carefully. He couldn't test anything directly without triggering alerts, but he could simulate scenarios in his head. He understood programming. The Zelthrons had taught him that, needing humans who could maintain their systems. They had given him the tools to hurt them without realizing it. 300 light-years away on a supply station orbiting a different world, Helen Price was making similar discoveries. She was 35, a mechanical engineer who had spent 15 years repairing service drones for the Zelthrons. The drones were simple machines that performed basic tasks throughout the station. What Helen had noticed was that they used the same communication protocols as the slave collars. She started small, adjusting frequencies on a broken drone during her repair shift. If she modulated the signal just right, she could make nearby collars beep. It was a tiny thing, barely noticeable, but it proved something important. The collars could be affected by external signals. Helen didn't tell anyone at first. Trust was dangerous. The Zelthrons had human informants who traded information for better treatment. But she kept experimenting, learning more with each repair shift, building a map in her mind of how the system worked. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A medical assistant named Carl Webb working in a facility on another planet discovered something during a routine health scan. The collars monitored biological data and transmitted it constantly to central servers, but the data stream was two-way. The collars received instructions back, and those instructions could be intercepted. Carl shared his discovery with one person, a data clerk named Amy Chen. Amy worked in communications and had access to message routing systems. She realized that if they could insert code into the instruction stream, they might be able to affect collar behavior across the network. The network grew slowly, carefully. One person told one other person they absolutely trusted. That person told another. Information spread through whispers and hidden messages, scratched codes on bathroom walls, and brief eye contact that meant "I know something." It took years to build because safety required patience. Danny made contact with the network in his 3rd year of planning. A new worker arrived at his facility, a woman named Susan Hart, who had been transferred from another station. During a meal break, she sat next to Danny and spoke quietly without looking at him. "I hear you understand computer systems," she said. "I maintain them," Danny replied carefully. "I knew someone who maintained them differently," Susan said. "He made them do things they weren't supposed to do." Danny's heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "That sounds dangerous." "Everything is dangerous," Susan said. "But some dangers are worth it." That conversation changed everything. Susan connected Danny to the network. Suddenly, he wasn't alone. There were hundreds of humans across the Empire, all working on the same problem from different angles. Engineers, programmers, doctors, technicians, everyone contributing small pieces of a larger solution. They called themselves the Chain Breakers, though they never said the name aloud. They communicated through coded messages hidden in work reports using algorithms that looked like random errors but contained real information. The Zelthrons monitored everything, but they were looking for obvious rebellion. They never imagined humans could organize so subtly. The plan came together piece by piece. Danny contributed code that could spread through the collar network like a virus. Helen provided specifications for the signal disruption needed to disable the shock mechanism. Carl mapped the biological sensors that would need to be overridden. Amy designed the distribution method that would hit every collar simultaneously. It took 12 years. 12 years of humans barely knowing each other's names, working in secret, risking everything. People were caught sometimes. The Zelthrons would discover someone had accessed restricted files or modified a system without authorization. Those people died badly. The Empire made examples of them. Public executions meant to terrify others into compliance. But for every person caught, 2 more joined the network. Because humans are stubborn creatures. You can break their bodies, but breaking their spirit requires killing them. And the Zelthrons needed their slaves alive. Jake Morrison joined the Chainbreakers in his 85th year. He was old, tired, and had spent most of his life in slavery. But when Danny's contact reached him in the asteroid mines, Jake didn't hesitate. He had technical knowledge from his military career. He could contribute. And more than that, he wanted to hurt the creatures who had stolen his life. "What do you need?" Jake asked the contact, a young woman named Beth Cooper who worked in station logistics. "Access to the mining station's communication array," Beth said. "When we launch the virus, every node needs to transmit. Your station is one of them." "You'll have it," Jake promised. Lisa Grant, now 45 years old and still laboring in the fields of Sector 7G, received her contact through an old man named Paul Davis, who had been transferred from another agricultural world. Paul was nearly 70, bent from decades of hard labor, but his mind was sharp. "You've been teaching the younger ones," Paul said one evening as they worked together. It wasn't a question. Lisa tensed. Teaching was dangerous. The Zelthrons wanted obedient workers, not educated ones. But she had been carefully sharing knowledge with younger humans, telling them about Earth, about freedom, about human history. She thought she had been subtle. "I tell stories," Lisa said carefully. "Good stories," Paul replied. "True stories. The kind that make people remember who they are." He glanced around to make sure no overseers were watching, then continued. "There's a group. People like you. People who remember. We're going to do something. We need you ready when it happens." "What are we going to do?" Lisa asked. "We're going to take off our collars," Paul said. "All of us. Everywhere. At the same time." Lisa felt her pulse quicken. "That's impossible." "Impossible is what humans do best," Paul said with a slight smile. The final pieces fell into place in the 72nd year of human slavery. The virus was complete, tested in simulation 1,000 times. The distribution network was mapped. Every major facility had chain breakers ready to act. They had set the date for the anniversary of Earth's surrender. It felt appropriate somehow. The day humanity had fallen would become the day humanity rose. Danny sat at his terminal during the night shift, completely alone in the control room. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. The launch code was ready. One command would release the virus into the collar network. It would spread faster than the Zelthrons could react, hitting every collar in the Empire within minutes. This was either freedom or extinction. If it failed, if the Zelthrons tracked it back to the source, everyone involved would die. But if they did nothing, humanity would remain enslaved forever. Some choices weren't really choices at all. Danny thought about his mother, dead 10 years from exhaustion. He thought about his father, crushed by machinery. He thought about all the humans who had lived and died in chains, never knowing anything else. He thought about the children being born into slavery, generation after generation. He entered the command and pressed execute. The virus launched at 0300 station time, spreading through the network at the speed of light. Within 5 minutes, it had reached every corner of the Empire. Within 10 minutes, every human collar in existence received the same instruction: unlock. Across 400 worlds, from mining stations to agricultural colonies, from factory floors to domestic service centers, 100 million collars opened and fell away. For the first time in 70 years, humans felt their necks without the weight of chains. The first thing Jake Morrison did when his collar fell away was touch his neck. The skin was scarred, worn smooth by 70 years of metal pressing against it. He ran his fingers over the grooves, feeling the absence of weight. Around him in the asteroid mine, 300 other humans had stopped working. They stood frozen, hands reaching for their throats, faces showing confusion and disbelief. The Zelthron overseer noticed immediately. He was a thin gray creature standing on an observation platform, monitoring the human workers through cameras and sensors. When every human stopped simultaneously, he activated his communicator and barked orders in his harsh language. Nobody moved. The overseer pulled out his shock remote, the device that had been every human's nightmare for decades. He pointed it at the nearest worker and pressed the button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, harder, as if physical force would make it work. Still nothing. Jake picked up his mining tool, a heavy piece of equipment designed for breaking rocks. He was 87 years old, but rage made him strong. He walked toward the observation platform with steady steps. The overseer saw him coming and reached for the alarm. Jake threw the mining tool with both hands. It struck the overseer in the center of his body, crushing him against the wall. The creature made a wet sound and stopped moving. Around Jake, humans were staring. Some at the dead overseer, some at Jake, some at their own hands, as if seeing them for the first time. "We're free," Jake said. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper. Then louder. "We're free." Someone started crying. Then someone else laughed. Then chaos erupted as 70 years of suppressed emotion came flooding out. Humans were shouting, embracing, weeping. Jake let them have their moment. They had earned it. "Listen." Jake shouted over the noise. "Listen to me. This is just the start. The Zelthrons will come. We need to be ready." He was right. On Sector 7G, Lisa Grant felt her collar release and immediately understood what was happening. This was it, the moment Paul Davis had told her about. She looked around the field where 50 humans were working. All of them had stopped, hands at their throats, confused faces turning to hope. "Now!" Lisa shouted. "Move now. Get to the equipment sheds." She had spent 3 decades on this planet, learning every building, every storage area, every weak point in the colony structure. She had taught others, too, preparing them for a moment she barely believed would come. Now, it was here, and training took over. 20 humans ran toward the equipment sheds where tools and machinery were stored. Another group headed for the fuel depot. Lisa herself ran to the administration building where the Zelthron managers worked. She grabbed a metal bar from a pile of scrap materials as she ran. The building had 12 Zelthrons inside. They were just beginning to realize something was wrong when Lisa and 15 humans burst through the doors. The Zelthrons had weapons, but they were administrators, not soldiers. They had spent decades giving orders to obedient slaves. They didn't know how to fight desperate humans with improvised weapons and nothing left to lose. The battle was short and brutal. Lisa took a plasma burn across her shoulder, but kept moving. A Zelthron raised a weapon toward her face. Lisa swung the metal bar with all her strength, connecting with the creature's head. It went down and didn't get up. 6 minutes after the collars fell, the administration building was secure. The Zelthrons inside were dead. Lisa stood among the bodies, breathing hard, blood running down her arm. Around her, humans were staring at what they had done. "Don't stop," Lisa ordered. "Secure the colony. Find every Zelthron. No mercy. Because mercy would get them killed. The Zelthrons would never forgive this. There was no going back now. This was freedom or death, and Lisa chose freedom." The uprising on Sector 7G lasted 6 hours. The colony had 200 Zelthron administrators, guards, and technical staff. By the time the sun set, all of them were dead. The human cost was 37 killed and over 100 wounded, but the planet was theirs. Lisa stood in the colony's command center, looking at communication screens showing chaos across the Empire. Hundreds of facilities reporting slave uprisings. Dozens of Zelthron officials calling for help. The Empire was burning. She activated the outgoing transmission system and broadcast on all frequencies. "This is Sector 7G. We are free. Any humans receiving this, you are not alone. We are free." Similar scenes played out across the Empire, though not all ended in victory. Some colonies had heavy military presence. Some humans were too weak from decades of abuse to fight effectively. Some simply got unlucky, and Zelthron reinforcements arrived before the uprising could succeed. But enough succeeded. Within the first day, humans controlled 17 planets, 43 space stations, and several asteroid mining operations. They had also captured 6 Zelthron warships, though most humans had no idea how to operate them yet. Helen Price found herself leading the takeover of her supply station through a combination of planning and necessity. The station had 37 humans and a garrison of 12 Zelthron soldiers. The soldiers had weapons and training. The humans had surprise and desperation. Helen gathered everyone in the maintenance bay immediately after the collars fell. "The garrison sleeps in Section C," she said quickly. "There are emergency controls that can vent that section to space. I can reach them from here." A young man named Kevin Ross looked sick. "That's murder. They enslaved our entire species," Helen said flatly. "They were never going to let us go. This is survival." She moved to the control panel before anyone could argue further. The station's environmental systems were old but functional. She pulled up the schematic for Section C, located the external vent controls, and paused with her hand over the activation switch. For a moment, she hesitated. This wasn't who she wanted to be. She was an engineer, not a killer. But the Zelthrons had left her no choice. They had taken her life, her freedom, her humanity. They would take it all back if she didn't act now. Helen activated the vent. Section C explosively decompressed in 3 seconds. The Zelthron garrison never knew what happened. One moment they were sleeping. The next they were frozen corpses drifting in vacuum. Helen watched it happen on the monitors, forcing herself not to look away. She had done this. She needed to own it. The remaining Zelthrons on the station, technicians and administrators, were rounded up and locked in cargo holds. Some humans wanted to kill them immediately. Helen stopped them. "We're not them," she said. "We lock them up. We take their ships, but we don't become murderers if we can avoid it." It was a thin distinction given what she had just done to the garrison. But humans needed to believe they were better than their former masters, even if it wasn't completely true. Danny Oakes never saw any of it. The moment he launched the virus, automated security systems flagged his terminal as the source. Alerts went out across the facility. Zelthron guards received emergency calls. Danny had known this would happen. He had accepted it before pressing the execute button. He stood from his terminal and walked calmly to the equipment locker where maintenance tools were stored. He selected the largest wrench available and turned toward the door just as it burst open. 3 Zelthron guards entered, weapons raised. Danny charged them. He wasn't a soldier. He had no combat training. He just had rage and a wrench and the knowledge that his death had meaning. The first guard's weapon fired, burning a hole through Danny's chest. He kept moving, momentum carrying him forward. The wrench connected with the guard's head. The creature fell. Danny collapsed on top of it, blood spreading across the floor. He died knowing the collars were broken. That was enough. Across the Empire, the Zelthron High Command scrambled to respond. Emergency meetings were called. Military commanders received orders to recapture slave populations by any means necessary. The Empire had dealt with slave revolts before. Small isolated incidents easily crushed. But nothing like this. Never anything like this. 100 million humans had just stopped following orders simultaneously. Thousands of Zelthron administrators were dead. Dozens of facilities had gone dark. This wasn't a revolt. This was a war. Admiral Thal commanded the nearest military fleet to the Sol system. He received orders to recapture the human home world immediately. Earth was valuable both as a symbol and a resource. The humans there needed to be reminded of their place. But as Thal prepared his fleet for jump, reports came in about the asteroid mines. Human slaves there had killed their overseers and seized control. More concerning, they had taken several mining ships and were modifying them. The humans weren't just running. They were arming themselves. Thal adjusted his plans. He would deal with the miners first, crush them as a warning to others, then he would take back Earth. He had no idea that every ship in his fleet had human technicians who had just taken off their collars. He didn't know that those technicians were already making plans. He didn't understand what humans could do when they stopped being afraid. He would learn the hard way. The Zelthron High Command met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The Grand Chamber on their home world was filled with military commanders, planetary governors, and intelligence officers. They all had the same reports, the same impossible reports. 100 million human slaves had simultaneously broken free. 17 planets were under human control. Thousands of Zelthron administrators were dead. The numbers kept growing with each update. Fleet Admiral Sgar stood before the council, his gray skin darker with anger. He was the Empire's supreme military commander, veteran of a dozen conquest campaigns. He had never faced a threat like this. "This cannot be tolerated," Sgar announced. "We will make an example that will terrify every species in the Empire. We will show what happens to those who defy us." The council agreed immediately. They authorized Sgar to assemble a response force of 200 warships, enough firepower to turn planets into dust. The fleet would systematically recapture or destroy every human-held position, starting with Sector 7G and working inward toward Earth itself. "We gave them mercy once," Sgar said. "We allowed them to live as servants. They have rejected our generosity. Now they will learn that mercy is a privilege of the strong, not a right of the weak." The fleet assembled within 3 days. 200 warships, each crewed by trained Zelthron soldiers. Thousands of ground troops ready to recapture escaped slaves. Advanced weapons capable of cracking planets. This wasn't a military operation. It was an extermination waiting to happen. What Sgar didn't know, what none of them knew, was that humans had been maintaining those warships for 70 years. Every ship in his fleet had human technicians, mechanics, and engineers. They cleaned the vessels, repaired the systems, and kept everything running smoothly. The Zelthrons had trusted them because slaves were supposed to be obedient. When the collars fell, most of those human technicians chose to stay aboard rather than flee. They had a better plan. Greg Porter was one of them. He was 40 years old and had spent his entire adult life maintaining fusion reactors on Zelthron warships. He knew every system, every safety mechanism, every weak point. He had learned it all while pretending to be a simple slave who just followed orders. When his collar released, Greg didn't run. He gathered the other human technicians in the engineering section of the flagship and spoke quietly. "We have 2 days before the fleet jumps to Sector 7G. We can stop this. All of it." There were 8 humans in engineering. All of them understood what Greg was suggesting. Sabotage the fleet from within. It was suicide. The moment the Zelthrons discovered what they were doing, they would all die. But if they did nothing, millions of humans on Sector 7G would die instead. "I'm in," said a woman named Rachel Burke. She was the youngest of the group, barely 25, but she worked on the weapon systems. "I can disable the targeting computers. Make them fire randomly. I can reroute fuel lines," another technician named Chris Ward added. "Make the reactors unstable." One by one, they committed. 8 humans against a warship crew of 300 Zelthrons. The odds were terrible. The plan was insane. They started working immediately. The fleet jumped to Sector 7G exactly on schedule. 200 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, surrounding the planet where Lisa Grant and 12,000 freed humans waited. They had known this was coming. They had prepared as much as possible, but there was only so much you could do against those odds. Lisa stood on the surface, looking up at the sky as it filled with enemy vessels. The ships were enormous, blotting out the stars. Each one could destroy a city with a single shot. There were 200 of them. Around her, humans had gathered. Some were armed with captured Zelthron weapons. Others had improvised weapons made from farming equipment. All of them were ready to die rather than put the collars back on. Lisa had made that clear in the days since liberation. Freedom or death. No third option. "We hurt them," Lisa said loudly, her voice carried across the assembled crowd. "We make them pay for every inch of ground. We make them remember that humans don't break." The crowd roared approval. They were farmers, laborers, people who had spent their lives planting crops. Now they were soldiers, not trained soldiers, not professional soldiers, just desperate humans with nothing left to lose. In orbit, Admiral Sgar watched the planet on his command screen. He could see the humans gathered on the surface, could see the primitive weapons they had assembled. It was pathetic. They actually thought they could fight. All ships prepare to fire, Sgar ordered. Target population centers. We will turn their settlements to ash. His tactical officer activated the firing sequence. 200 warships charged their weapons simultaneously, enough power to scorch the planet's surface, killing every human and rendering the world uninhabitable for decades. It would be a waste of a perfectly good agricultural planet. But the message was more important than resources. Then the sky started exploding. On the flagship, Greg Porter had spent 2 days carefully preparing. He had rerouted fuel lines where they shouldn't go. He had disabled safety systems that were designed to prevent catastrophic failures. He had locked out override controls. He had turned the ship's fusion reactor into a bomb with a 2-minute delay. When Admiral Sgar gave the order to fire, Greg activated his program. Warning alarms blared across the engineering section. Zelthron crew members rushed to their stations, trying to understand what was happening. The reactor temperature was climbing rapidly, far beyond safe levels. Greg stood calmly in the middle of the chaos. A Zelthron engineer spotted him and realized immediately what had happened. The creature drew a weapon and pointed it at Greg's head. Too late, Greg said simply. The fusion reactor went critical. The flagship exploded in a ball of fire that consumed everything within 1,000 kilometers. Admiral Sgar died without understanding what had killed him. Across the fleet, human saboteurs acted simultaneously. Some ships lost power completely, their reactors shut down by modified control systems. Others tore themselves apart as fuel lines ruptured and flooded engine compartments. Weapon systems malfunctioned, firing randomly or not at all. Navigation computers reported false data, causing ships to collide with each other. 50 Zelthron warships died in the first 5 minutes, destroyed by their own human crew members. The survivors scattered in confusion, trying to regroup while human-modified systems continued to fail around them. Lisa watched from the surface as the orbital battle became a massacre. The captured Zelthron warships under human control, only 6 ships total, opened fire on the confused fleet. They targeted damaged vessels, finishing off ships that were already dying from sabotage. The battle lasted 2 hours. When it was over, only 70 Zelthron ships remained from the original 200. They fled the system in disorder, carrying tales of ships destroying themselves, of human slaves who understood Zelthron technology better than the Zelthrons did. Lisa stood among celebrating humans, watching the enemy flee. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had actually won. But the cost was terrible. 8 humans had died on each of the 50 ships they destroyed. 400 human technicians had sacrificed themselves to save 12,000 on the planet below. She would remember their names. All of them. They deserved that much. Jake Morrison heard about the battle from his captured mining station in the Sol system. The news spread quickly through the human network. A Zelthron fleet sent to crush them had been destroyed. Not by superior weapons or tactics, but by humans who understood the enemy's technology and used it against them. He smiled for the first time in 70 years. It was a terrible smile, full of anger and satisfaction and pain. They wanted slaves, Jake said to the humans gathered around him. They taught us to build their ships, maintain their weapons, understand their systems. They made us valuable. They should have made us stupid instead. The news reached the Zelthron High Command within hours. An entire fleet destroyed. The survivors reported ships exploding for no reason, systems failing catastrophically, human technicians sabotaging vessels from within. It wasn't just a military defeat. It was a revelation of how badly they had miscalculated. The humans weren't just rebelling. They were fighting a war. And they were winning. Emergency meetings were called. New strategies discussed. More fleets assembled. But now there was fear mixed with the anger. Fear of what else the humans might know. Fear of what other systems they might have infiltrated. Fear that 70 years of having humans maintain everything meant humans could destroy everything. The Zelthron Empire had ruled the galaxy through overwhelming force and the belief that conquered species would stay conquered. They had never imagined that teaching slaves to be useful would give those slaves the tools to rebel. They were learning, but the lesson was written in fire and blood, in exploding warships and dead admirals. And the humans were just getting started. The war lasted 8 years. 8 years of humans fighting with captured weapons, improvised tactics, and a fury that burned hotter than any star. The Zelthron Empire had the advantage in every measurable way. More ships, better weapons, thousands of years of military experience. But they were fighting an enemy that didn't follow the rules. Helen Price became humanity's chief military engineer not through appointment, but through necessity. After leading the takeover of her supply station, she found herself coordinating with other freed stations, sharing information about Zelthron technology and how to exploit it. Within months, humans across the Empire were asking her for advice. She didn't design new weapons. She didn't need to. Everything was already a weapon if you thought about it correctly. "This is a cargo hauler," Helen explained during a broadcast to human resistance cells. She was standing next to a massive ship designed to transport goods between planets. "The Zelthrons see it as transportation. We see it as a missile that can carry 10,000 tons of explosive material." She moved to another vessel, a mining ship equipped with powerful drilling lasers. "This is rated for asteroid work." The Zelthrons never considered that the same laser that cuts rock can cut through ship armor. Helen taught humans to think creatively. Agricultural chemicals could be weaponized. Maintenance tools could become bombs. Even simple cargo containers could be dangerous if you understood physics and had nothing left to lose. The Zelthrons learned to fear human creativity. Every battle was different. Humans didn't fight fair. They ambushed supply convoys, sabotaged facilities from within, and turned peaceful colonies into death traps overnight. Traditional military doctrine didn't work against an enemy that had no formal structure and no central command. Lisa Grant remained on Sector 7G, turning the agricultural world into a fortress. 12,000 humans worked day and night, building defenses, training soldiers, and preparing for the inevitable second attack. When it came 3 months after the first battle, they were ready. The Zelthrons sent a smaller fleet this time, only 30 ships, but they approached cautiously. They bombarded the planet from orbit rather than landing troops. Lisa had anticipated this. The humans had evaluated the major settlements and hidden in underground bunkers built during those 3 months of preparation. The bombardment destroyed empty buildings. When it ended and Zelthron ground forces finally landed, they found themselves fighting humans who knew every tunnel, every hiding spot, every advantage the terrain offered. The battle lasted 2 weeks. The Zelthrons lost. News of the victory spread across the human network. Other colonies started preparing similar defenses. The pattern repeated on dozens of worlds. Zelthrons would attack. Humans would make them pay in blood for every victory. And even when the Zelthrons won, they found themselves controlling rubble and corpses rather than functioning facilities. The Empire began to crack, not from external pressure, but from within. The Zelthrons had conquered dozens of species over the millennia. All of them had watched their masters enslave humanity. All of them had accepted that resistance was futile. But now they saw humans breaking free, killing Zelthrons, winning battles they should have lost. If humans could rebel successfully, why couldn't they? Within 2 years of the Kala liberation, 3 other slave species had begun their own uprisings. The Empire suddenly had fires burning across hundreds of worlds. The Zelthron military was stretched thin, trying to maintain control while fighting multiple wars simultaneously. Jake Morrison died in the 5th year of the war. He was 92 years old, leading a boarding action on a Zelthron dreadnought. The ship had been attacking human settlements in the Sol system. Jake and 50 other humans used mining shuttles to reach the dreadnought, cutting through the hull with industrial tools. The fighting inside was brutal. Zelthron soldiers had better weapons and armor, but they were fighting in narrow corridors against humans who didn't care about surviving. Jake took 3 plasma burns and kept moving. He reached the ship's bridge with 5 other humans still alive. The Zelthron captain raised a weapon. Jake threw himself forward, tackling the creature. They fell together, Jake's hands around the captain's throat. As his vision faded, Jake's last words were barely a whisper. "Tell them we're not slaves anymore." The other humans finished securing the bridge. The dreadnought became the first capital ship under complete human control. They renamed it Freedom and used it to protect Earth from further attacks. The liberation of Earth itself took 3 years of planning. The planet had been turned into a breeding facility for human slaves, heavily fortified and guarded by an entire fleet. The Zelthrons considered it their most valuable asset. Billions of humans lived there, most born into slavery, many not even knowing freedom was possible. Lisa Grant took command of the liberation effort. She was 53 years old, scarred from dozens of battles, and completely focused on one goal, taking back humanity's home world. She assembled every available human ship, every fighter, every weapon. The fleet that jumped into the Sol system wasn't impressive by Zelthron standards: 60 captured warships, 100 converted cargo vessels, and countless small craft, but they were commanded by humans who knew how to hurt the enemy. The battle for Earth lasted 3 months. It wasn't a single engagement, but hundreds of small actions. Humans attacked supply lines, ambushed patrols, and slowly wore down the defending fleet. On the ground, resistance cells that had been hiding for years activated simultaneously, attacking Zelthron facilities across every continent. The Zelthrons fought desperately. Earth was symbolic. Losing it would mean admitting that humans were winning. They threw reinforcements at the planet, pulled ships from other sectors, and accepted losses they couldn't afford. Lisa directed the space battle from the bridge of a captured cruiser. She wasn't a trained naval commander, but she understood the basics: keep moving, hit supply ships, make every fight cost more than it was worth. Gradually, the Zelthron fleet weakened. The final battle happened above North America. 20 Zelthron warships made a last stand, trying to hold the orbital space platforms that controlled the planet's defenses. Lisa's fleet attacked from 4 directions simultaneously, accepting terrible losses to break through. When the last Zelthron ship surrendered, Lisa stood on the bridge and cried. She was 53 years old. She had spent 38 years as a slave. Now Earth was free. She ordered a shuttle to take her planetside. She wanted to stand on ground her ancestors had walked. When she landed in what had been New York City, she found ruins. The Zelthrons had destroyed most of the old cities decades ago, but humans had survived. They always survived. Lisa planted a flag in the rubble. It was just cloth on a pole. Nothing special, but it represented something the Zelthrons had tried to destroy. Hope. Pride. Humanity. The war continued for 3 more years after Earth's liberation. The Zelthron Empire was collapsing, but they fought stubbornly, trying to maintain control of their remaining territories. More slave species rebelled. Zelthron fleets mutinied. Entire planets declared independence. The final battle occurred above the Zelthron home world. Humanity brought every ship they had, 200 vessels that had been captured, built, or converted during the war. They broadcast one message on all frequencies as they entered the system: you called us slaves. You thought we would serve forever. You were wrong. The Zelthrons could have fought. Their home world had powerful defenses, multiple fleets, and billions of citizens who could be mobilized. But they had been fighting for 8 years. They had lost thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, and most of their empire. They were exhausted. The Zelthron High Command surrendered. Humanity could have destroyed the planet. Could have exterminated every Zelthron in existence, payback for 70 years of slavery. Some humans argued for exactly that, but others remembered who they were supposed to be. We're not them, Helen Price said during the debate about what to do with the Zelthron home world. We don't wipe out entire species. That's what they would do. We're better. It was a close vote, but mercy won. Humanity issued terms: complete disarmament of Zelthron military forces, reparations to be paid to freed slaves, war crimes trials for those who had commanded the slave system. The Zelthrons would be allowed to survive, but they would never threaten anyone again. 10 years after the collars fell, humanity controlled 40 star systems. The Zelthron Empire was gone, broken into dozens of independent states. Other freed species had formed their own governments. The galaxy was entering a new age. Helen Price stood before the memorial wall on Earth, reading names. There were millions of them. Humans who had died in slavery. Humans who had died fighting for freedom. Each name represented a life stolen, a story ended. She found Danny Oaks near the top of the wall. He had died in the first hour of rebellion, killed before seeing the freedom he had helped create. Helen touched his name gently. "We did it," she whispered. "We're free." Lisa Grant lived to be 78 years old. She spent her later years helping rebuild Earth, teaching young humans about the war, making sure nobody forgot what slavery had cost. When she died peacefully in her sleep, thousands attended her funeral. She was buried with her collar, the one she had worn for 38 years, not as a symbol of slavery, but as a reminder of what humanity had overcome. The galaxy remade itself in the aftermath of the Zelthron collapse. New alliances formed between former slave species. Trade routes reopened under fair terms. Knowledge that had been hoarded by the Empire was shared freely. Humanity, once scattered and broken, became a guiding force in this new galactic community. They remembered what it meant to be enslaved, and they worked to ensure no species would ever suffer that fate again. On the 75th anniversary of the Kala liberation, a monument was unveiled on Earth, a towering sculpture of a human hand breaking a chain. At its base were engraved words that had become humanity's motto in the decades since their freedom. We were slaves. We are free. We will never forget. The stars no longer belong to the Zelthrons. They belong to everyone who had the courage to reach for them,